When I was much younger and my ministry was just starting out, I remember I had the opportunity to go and speak somewhere. Someone had ran into me. We got to talking about what it is that we did, and they invited me to go speak at their church. I was super excited because I knew that God had given me this gifting. I knew that He was developing this in me. I knew that my future was ministry. I didn't know what it looked like though, but in my mind, this was the opportunity. I was going to go, they were going to see my gift, and my name was going to get out there, and God was just going to begin to open the doors. I remember being super excited about this, and I went to go tell my dad about it. I said, "Dad, I got invited to speak somewhere. We need to figure out the way to get there. We need to figure out the plan. We need to work this all out because I'm going to speak." But I remember my dad, he didn't have the reaction that I thought he would have. He looked at me and he said, "Son, I don't think you should take this speaking engagement." I was frustrated. I was hurt. I was angry. Was he jealous? Was he upset? This didn't make sense to me because he was the main one developing the gift inside of me. It didn't make sense. Why would he not want me to take this speaking engagement? As time progressed and I began to get older and begin to get more information, what I learned is that the reason that my dad advised me to not take that speaking engagement was because he had information that I did not have. This reminds me of our relationship with God and how oftentimes we're seeking the face of God for direction. We're seeking the face of God for plans for our future and guidance of what steps to take. Or we're asking God to intervene in a situation. We're saying, "God, what is the answer?" But then the advice that He gives us or the direction that He leads us to is not exactly the way that we thought it would look. It's not exactly the path that we thought we should take. And so what happens is we begin to get frustrated. We begin to question whether or not we should be trusting in God because, this is what we see and God must not see what we see, because if He saw what we saw, we wouldn't be directing us in the way that He's directing us. So what's going on? And what begins to happen is we begin to lose trust in God because we don't understand that He has information that we do not have. And this is exactly what we're talking about. In week 26 of our family devotional series, we are talking about the sovereignty of God. And what this means is that the word sovereignty, what it means is that simply God is in control. God has all the information. God has all the power, and God is over all the universe, in control of all the universe, and is the answer to every single thing that we can ever face. And I think as Christians, we know this, we believe this. God is all powerful, almighty, all this, whatever. But then, whenever God advises us or leads us in a situation that's a different direction than we thought we should take, deep down, we begin to question the belief in these truths that we know. We begin to wonder if God really does know what He's doing. We begin to wonder if God really is in control. After all, if He did know everything, if He was in control, then He would clearly be able to see that this is not the answer. So why is He leading me in this direction? We begin to question the sovereignty of God. But when we understand who God is, our response to who He is will be different. And this is exactly what our verse talks about this week. So let's read that scripture together. Psalm 95:6. Come, let us worship and bow down. Let us kneel before the Lord our Maker. Oftentimes when we think about worship, we think about us being in a large crowd of people in an auditorium or a sanctuary with hands lifted to the ceiling, tears falling down people's face, and the music being played just right. And while worship with song is a part of worship, it is only a small part of worship, as true and proper worship is giving our life in a response to who God is and what He has done. And so as Christians, a lot of times we say, we believe that God is sovereign. We believe He's in control. We believe that God reigns and that He's the one in charge. But an indicator to see if we really do believe these things is the measure in which we give our life to God. What am I saying? You can see your belief and trust in the power and almightiness and the sovereignty of God by the way that you give your life to God. Because if we really believed God was in control, if we really believe that God holds every moment and that God is the answer and He has all power, then our response to Him would be to give Him absolutely everything. Now understand in this life that is way easier said than done. We face many different tragedies, many different tough situations. We face many different things that we don't have the answer to. And it's a lot easier said than done than to just give those things to God and not worry about them and let Him take control. But what I'm challenging you to do is to not give God everything. Yes, we need to give God everything. We need to give it all to God, but evaluate what you really believe about God. Do you believe that He's in control of it all? Do you believe that He's in charge? Do you believe that He has all power? You know, in our world, there are a lot of events happening globally. There's many different wars. There's many different nations coming against nations and other nations intervening. And we as America are right in the middle of all of that. What I find so interesting is that the scripture speaks of these things. And what we see is time and time again, the things that play out in history line up with scripture, line up with exactly the way that God said things were going to take place. And what this tells me is that God knows it all. God's seen the beginning from the end. God has lived our tomorrow. God is the answer to everything we could ever face. And I want to encourage you and challenge you to take just a few moments and get in God's presence and evaluate what you really believe about God. Because I believe when we understand who God is and we understand the power and authority that He has, our response is to come and bow our lives down in worship and to give Him everything. I know this is not easy, and I know sometimes it's a challenge, but I want to ask you some questions. What would your life look like if you fully responded to who God was and you had a clear understanding of the power and the strength of God and the authority of God? How would your life look different? What would your trust look like? What would your faith look like? What would your life look like if you surrendered it all to Him because of who He is? God is sovereign. And let's talk about this concept in our family discussion questions together.